The locked room. It was Jake's first night as a security guard. He was excited but nervous. The old hotel he was guarding was known for its history. The floors creaked, and the walls seemed to whisper. The air inside felt cold and heavy. His boss had given him simple instructions: check the floors and stay away from room 104. Why? Jake had asked. The boss's face turned serious. Just don't go near it, he said. Some rooms have secrets. Jake thought it was just a scare tactic. He was not easily frightened. He nodded, took his flashlight, and began his shift. The night started quietly. He walked through the empty halls, his footsteps echoing. The dim lights cast long shadows on the walls. Jake liked the quiet. It felt peaceful. But as he passed by room 104, he felt a chill run down his spine. The door to room 104 was old and heavy. It was made of dark wood with strange carvings on it. The brass handle looked worn, as if many hands had turned it over the years. He shook his head, trying to ignore the feeling. He continued down the hall, forcing himself to forget about the door. Hours passed. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. Midnight arrived, and with it, a storm. Thunder rumbled outside, and rain battered the windows. Jake pulled his jacket tighter and went back to check the floors again. When he reached the hallway where room 104 was, he heard something strange. It was a sound like scratching. He stopped and listened closely. It came from behind the door of room 104. The sound was soft at first, but it grew louder, like nails scraping on wood. His heart pounded. He took a deep breath and stepped closer. "Hello," he called out, but there was no reply. The scratching stopped suddenly. He waited for a few seconds, but nothing happened. He felt foolish for being scared. Maybe it was just an old pipe or a rat behind the walls. He turned to leave, but then he heard a faint cry, like someone whispering his name. "Jake?" He froze. The voice was low and shaky. He turned back to the door, his hands trembling. "Who's there?" he asked, but again, there was no answer. He decided he had to check the room. He reached for his keys, but then he remembered the warning. "Stay away from room 104, his boss had said. But Jake was curious. Maybe it was someone playing a prank. Or maybe someone needed help. He fumbled with the keyring and found the key. It slid into the lock easily, as if the door had been waiting for him. He turned the key, and the door creaked open. Inside, the room was pitch black. He shone his flashlight inside. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing dusty furniture. A bed, a dresser, and an old chair sat near the window. Everything was covered in a thick layer of dust, as if the room had not been touched for years. Jake stepped inside and the door closed behind him with a loud bang. He jumped and spun around, but no one was there. He tried the handle, but it was stuck. Panic set in, but he forced himself to stay calm. He turned back to the room and looked around. That's when he saw it. The chair by the window was turned towards the wall. It was facing away from him, but it seemed wrong. The air grew colder, and his breath came out in puffs. He stepped closer, trying to see more clearly. The flashlight flickered, casting shadows that seemed to move. "Hello," he whispered, feeling silly but scared. The chair creaked. It moved slightly, as if someone was sitting in it and shifting their weight. Jake froze. He felt eyes on him, but the chair was empty. He wanted to run, but his feet were stuck in place. He took another step forward, his flashlight shaking in his hand. Suddenly, the flashlight died. Darkness swallowed the room. He cursed under his breath and smacked the flashlight, trying to get it to work. It flickered back on for a second, and he saw it, a pale hand resting on the arm of the chair. The light flickered off again, and the room went silent. Jake's heart pounded in his chest. He backed away, his hand reaching for the door handle. But then the voice returned, closer this time. "Help me, please." The voice was soft, barely a whisper. Jake's mind raced. He aimed the flashlight at the chair again, and this time it stayed on. But the chair was empty. No hand, no figure. Just the dusty old chair facing the wall. Jake wanted to leave, but his curiosity was too strong. He stepped closer to the chair and reached out. As soon as his hand touched the back of the chair, a cold wind rushed through the room, slamming the window shut. The chair spun around, but it was still empty. He stepped back, nearly tripping over his own feet. He looked around the room in panic. The walls seemed to close in on him, and he felt the air grow colder. He knew he had to leave. He pulled at the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. "Why did you come?" the voice asked, sounding closer than before. Jake turned around and saw something he would never forget. A shadowy figure stood by the window. It was tall, with no clear face, just darkness where a face should be. The figure pointed at him, its hand bony and thin. "You shouldn't have opened the door," it whispered. Jake's blood ran cold. He yanked at the door handle with all his strength. Finally, the door flew open, and he stumbled into the hallway. He slammed the door behind him and backed away, breathing heavily. His hands were shaking, and he could feel his heart pounding in his ears. He ran down the hall, not stopping until he reached the lobby. His boss was waiting there, looking annoyed. "I told you to stay away from that room," he said sternly. Jake tried to explain what he had seen, but his boss only shook his head. "That room has been empty for years," he said. "No one goes in there, not since the last guard disappeared." Jake's face turned pale. "What happened to him?" he asked. The boss sighed. He heard a voice calling him inside. He thought someone needed help. But when he went in, he never came out. Jake glanced back down the hallway. The door to room 104 was closed again, but he could still feel eyes watching him. He turned back to his boss, determined to quit that night. "Some doors are better left closed," the boss said with a grim smile. Jake never returned to the hotel after that night. But sometimes, when he closed his eyes, he could still hear the voice from room 104 whispering his name. The end.